Naruto exclusive videos lemon come out on my boosty. You can watch and subscribe. Link in the description, like the video and write a comment, enjoy watching. Description: it is clear to everyone that Naruto cannot live without adventures. But life after the war turned out in such a way that the famous blonde had to gather dust, gnawing on the granite of science, trampling her way to her dream. Boredom. True, it turned out that adventures also cannot live without Naruto. Take this, sign for it. The quest called Fall on Tobirama's Head begins. And in this set with Tobirama there are also Hashirama and Madara. Now it will definitely not be boring. Chapter 37. Naruto, exhausted by endless explanations and battered by shadow cloning, crawled into the residence closer to midnight. Everyone she managed to catch often looked skeptically at the papers with questions prepared in advance. She had to explain what needed to be done and what all this was for. Somewhere closer to evening, she realized that she was not being taken seriously, which really angered her. If it weren't for her own stubbornness, she would have spat on this matter and turned to Madara or Hashirama to conduct an explanatory conversation in front of the crowd. Their authority would not have caused so many stupid questions and blatant skepticism. But Naruto was not looking for easy ways. Therefore, she almost completely completed the task set before herself. As she assumed, someone in the residence was also up all night, sitting up late at work. A light was on in the window on the second floor. The answer, of course, was obvious. Naruto, taking a deep breath, straightened up and glided into the office with an almost graceful gait, portraying a proud maiden. Someone with blonde hair and red eyes paid zero attention to her. Tobirama, frowning, looked into a bowl of sake filled to the brim, and nothing else bothered him. The world around him seemed to not exist. Uzumaki directed a questioning look at him. But Tobirama, as if bewitched, looked at the cloudy white rice wine, as if only it mattered in this life. Uzumaki, deliberately making more noise, walked to the table and placed the remains of the questionnaires on the edge. Zero reaction. Naruto was suddenly angry about this. Hey! She leaned over the table and waved her palm right in front of Tobirama's nose. He only blinked slowly, glanced briefly and frighteningly absently at her face, and stared again at the cup of sake. If Naruto had been more tactful, she would have left Tobirama alone with his feelings and experiences, and gone home, quietly closing the door behind her. Unfortunately for Senju, Naruto was not one of them. Okay! And brazenly snatched the cup from under his nose. The wine protested, splashing the table and documents in retaliation. Tobirama came to life, as if Naruto had slapped him in the face, rather than taken away the wine, and raised a meaningful gaze to the outrageous blonde who had intruded into his drunken idol. Give it back! He glanced sideways at the wine, not deigning to look at her. Are you looking for answers to your questions in wine? Uzumaki finally understood what was going on. Tobirama was drunk. Very drunk. That's why he barely reacted to her presence. Again, you're butting in where you're not wanted. His gaze was still glued to the cup of wine. Greedy and desperate. Uzumaki felt like a merciless brute who had snatched a straw from a drowning man. It was a fleeting phenomenon, it instantly dissipated. Of the two of them, he was the brute. But the brute who at the moment looked terribly depressed, and therefore pathetic. Let's say, a desire to pity him awoke in her, to help him sort out the problem that was tormenting him. And to accompany all this with warm hugs and soothing strokes on his back, providing comprehensive support. Here I am here. Next to him, supporting him. She is better than wine, after all. Her own desires frightened her. She abruptly recoiled from the table, almost spilling wine on herself. Distance. You need to keep your distance. No hugs, caresses, or any physical contact at all. And it would be better not to poke your nose into Tobirama's soul at all. It could have bad consequences. Senju, realizing that the container with wine was moving away, took out the already uncorked bottle and took a big sip from the neck. I think I understand what's going on. Naruto diligently looked away from Senju's face. More precisely, from his mouth, greedily grasping the neck of the bottle. There was something exciting and disturbing about it. Senju, without stopping drinking, raised an eyebrow questioningly, ready to listen to her guesses. The quarrel with Hashirama affected you. Uzumaki focused on solving the problems of the overly sad and very drunk Tobirama, and not on the sudden and incredibly frightening feelings that were now sparkling in her like flashes of lightning, trying to blind her. Tobirama shook his head. That wasn't really it. The fight with Hashirama was just a small part of it. Stop drinking, Naruto said. Senju's noticeable indifference made Naruto squirm. He continued to sip his sake, not leaving the bottle. And to make sure he stopped drinking, Naruto, for the sake of courage, tipped the sake from the bowl into herself and put the empty cup on the table. Inhaling and exhaling, she resolutely covered the remaining distance between her and Tobirama and abruptly snatched the bottle from his hands. Fortunately, it was possible to do so. The drunk Senju could not imagine that Naruto would risk taking the bottle away while he was drinking from it. The wine spilled. Senju choked with indignation. Naruto spilled it on her hands, and also on Tobirama's chest and legs. Now he looked at this woman who allowed herself so much. Really? How did he have enough brains to fall in love with her? She was nasty and clingy. And a very, very bad influence on him. All his boastful self-control falls to the ground before her and her impudence. Naruto is the second reason he is getting drunk today. Does your impudence have any limits? The angry Senju barked. But Naruto was not impressed by the attempt to intimidate her. She backed away from the table only so that Tobirama would not think of snatching the bottle from her hands. Naruto left the question unanswered. She herself would never give an objective assessment of her own impudence. She seems to be living normally. And everything suits her. So from the outside it is easier to see how impudent she is. Senju something hissed discontentedly and impulsively stood up from the chair, almost knocking it over. Uzumaki immediately hid the bottle behind her back, sensing potential danger. As if that could work. If Senju wanted to take the drink, he would take it. Only here they would have to fight. Naruto never gave up so easily. Naruto tensed internally, looking warily at the staggering Tobirama. But he pretended not to see her, and went back in the opposite direction. Uzumaki blinked in bewilderment, closely watching him. And then he seemed to fall, pressing his cheek to the floor. Naruto involuntarily gasped, shuddered with her whole body from the unexpected maneuver of the albino. Now she was gnawed by anxiety from within. How much did you drink? Uzumaki was horrified out loud, rushing towards him. Not much yet, he answered dully, and then began to knock on the floorboards. I'm not sure, she said doubtfully, sitting down next to Tobirama, who was sprawled on the floor, intending to help him up. She put the bottle aside. She had no time for it now. Reaching out her hands to him, she immediately received a painful slap on her left palm. Tobirama decided to fight back. Don't interfere, woman. He waved her off and, taking out a kunai, began to chip away at the floorboard, raising himself up on one elbow from the floor. You're drunk, Uzumaki protested, not understanding what was happening. I told you, I'm not completely drunk yet. Go where you were going. The floorboard finally gave in and Tobirama threw it aside, sticking his hand into the opening. Half a minute, and he, grunting something joyfully, pulled out another bottle. Hashirama's supplies? Tobirama explained, feeling Uzumaki's palpable bewilderment behind his back. Oh gods! She said, either with relief or indignation. So it was true, he was not drunk enough, he was just looking for his brother's stash. But everything could change radically if she let him empty this bottle. With a heavy sigh, Naruto threw herself on Tobirama's back, stretching her arms over his shoulders to snatch the bottle. Senju, snorting discontentedly, began to fall back, having simply lost his coordination. Tobirama did not lose his head, and immediately hurried to use the situation to his advantage in order to eliminate this sticky thing. The prospect of crushing her smiled at him. Uzumaki had to give up his position. But she did not have time to get out. Tobirama, to be sure, also grabbed her hand, yanking her towards himself so that her chest pressed into his shoulder blades. and then a hard blow to the back of his head on the floor. Sparks from the eyes. And stifled breath to boot. Tobirama's massive body, falling on top of her, squeezed most of the oxygen out of her lungs. "You're going to crush me!" she cried weakly. There simply wasn't enough air to properly protest. But Senju remained deaf to her displeasure. With a triumphant smile that she absolutely could not see, he pressed a treasured bottle of wine to his chest, and the girl with her back to the floor. He also sprawled on top of her, as if she were a decorative pillow the size of a man, and uncorked the bottle. He only slightly raised his head so that it would be comfortable to drink while lying down. Naruto was furious, starting to tremble with irritation and anger, searching her vocabulary for a stronger word to express everything she thought about drunk Tobirama. Still, she should have ignored him, and not tried to be a champion of morality. Let him drink until he was green with snot, cowardly drowning his problems in alcohol. Why doesn't he want to understand that Madara is a monster? Senju suddenly asked, throwing his head back. The top of his head hit the floor with a dull thud. A turn of his head, and now he was breathing hotly on her neck, excitingly tickling her skin. Naruto shuddered and froze, afraid to even breathe. All the heat of rage faded under the rising wave of hot trembling. No matter how much you tell him the obvious, he does not want to face reality. Living in illusions, drunk Tobirama continued to speak about the sore point, demonstrating an incredible level of sincerity. Naruto's heart began to beat very quickly. There was not enough oxygen, but the situation worsened with the arrival of a new emotional storm. Her own feelings were frightening. How can he not understand that I am worried about him? A good-natured fool, the intonation of the younger Senju leaked out a corrosive bitterness mixed with old resentment. After all, if everything does not go as he imagines, he will suffer and blame himself. Senju's voice trembled from poorly concealed pain. Naruto stared unblinkingly at the ceiling, torn apart from within by an emotional hurricane. Tobirama's relaxed and drunken body threatened to flatten her. His hot breath made her heart do somersaults. And her soul cried, empathizing with the problems that the albino was going through. "If you do not get off me now, I will not answer you," Uzumaki barely squeezed out of herself, pushing the words out with effort. Thank the gods, he heard her and reacted almost immediately. It became much easier to breathe for many reasons. But she rejoiced too early. Senju apparently thought that lying on her was much more comfortable than on the cool and hard floor. And their position was just right for intimate conversations. So he simply lay down next to her, resting his head on her shoulder. "Isn't that too much?" Naruto, placing her palm on the top of Tobirama's head, tried to push him off of her. She felt awkward about this state of affairs, bodies and feelings. If it weren't for that kiss, she wouldn't have attached any importance to this turn of events, but now, it worried her as much as Tobirama, who had suddenly become frank. "Since when do such trifles bother you?" Tobirama asked curiously with a crooked smile on his lips, throwing his hand back and grabbing Naruto by the wrist in order to remove her palm. He was guided by the fact that such things didn't bother her. She hugged him, and bit him, and they slept together. And that bothers her? She can behave unreasonably, but he can't? Forget it. Naruto waved him off, twisting his arm out of Tobirama's grip. Raising herself up on her elbows and shifting her body weight slightly to the side, she reached for the bottle she had previously requisitioned from him. Senju muttered something under her side, his head slid off her shoulder. Naruto now clutched at the alcohol herself, like a drowning man at a straw. She couldn't do without it. Maybe the alcohol in her blood would lower the degree of tension and calm the storm inside her a little? Why is Hashirama such an idiot? Tobirama himself sat up, taking advantage of the moment, and taking another swig from the bottle. Too much emotion terrified him. He wanted to forget. Not think. Not worry. Not feel. But he could only allow himself to muffle this stormy and uncontrollable flow for a while. Because he believes in people to the last, Naruto said knowingly. In this, he and Hashirama were similar. She believed in Sasuke to the last, too. And for good reason. Her unshakable, perhaps incredibly stupid faith in him saved the Uchiha from death? From even more pain? From complete self-destruction? From himself? Maybe if Hashirama had been more stubborn and had not given up, Madara would not have done what he did. That's his problem, he responded vividly and very emotionally. Naruto winced at the volume of his voice, which thundered like a clap of thunder near her ear. There's no problem with that, she objected cheerfully. You know, I had one friend. The same gloomy type. He went down a crooked path, and I naively believed that I could bring him back. Bring him to his senses. When he became an enemy for everyone around me, I still considered him a friend and dreamed of getting him back. Nonsense, Tobirama snorted contemptuously. Naruto just rolled her eyes. You are as naive an idiot as my brother. So what? Uzumaki was not offended. Fools are not offended. But people like me. Tobirama would argue with this fact. Only a complete fool would like such an impudent girl. A bitter smile appeared on his lips. Apparently, he was a fool. In the end, he liked her, although initially she caused paradoxical rejection. And would this closeness be worth it if your friend destroyed all your friends in an instant? Or stuck a knife in your back? Tobirama asked seriously. This was exactly the kind of dirty trick he expected from Madara. It did not let him live. It was worth it. She made me who I am now. When I was faced with a choice, that red-eyed man or my friends, I just punched him in the face until he bled. And then we had a heart-to-heart talk, understanding and accepting each other's pain. Naruto's eyes stung. This intimate midnight conversation made her remember the past. About friends. As well as the fact that she would never see them again. I thought better of you, and you're stupid, who believed in a traitor and forgave the would-be killer of her friends. Tobirama expressed his opinion sharply and rudely. You know, Uzumaki could not stand it and flared up. You just have trust issues. I don't argue, Madara is another guy. Sometimes I'm afraid of him, but Naruto hesitated, choosing her words. In short, you yourself know how much Madara can love, and this one about Madara. Why couldn't either brother or this woman understand that Madara wasn't worthy of their trust? Tobirama felt terribly lonely and betrayed again, without support from those he cared about. A lousy feeling that had been breaking him inside for the entire day. Don't interfere, he growled warningly. Naruto had entered into a forbidden topic. Just now they were talking about Hashirama's stupidity, and now she had suddenly switched to the Uchiha Madara. Well, why don't you butt in? The future of Konoha is being decided here, and if you're as biased as he is, you'll only make things worse for the village, she said seriously. Since Setsu was dead, she could interfere in what was happening without a twinge of conscience. The future was no longer predetermined and depended on them here and now. We'll decide it without you. Tobirama waved off her good intentions and stood up, bringing a bottle of rice wine to his mouth. Who does this woman think she is? She doesn't understand anything about politics and is guided not by logic, but by feelings. And then Madara will get angry, leave the village. Come for revenge. He'll get hit on the head by Hashirama, run off into the darkness, where he'll hatch insidious plans to take over the world. She painted a vivid picture of the prospects of a gloomy future, based on her personal past. Madara is an adult and a sane person. He will understand that Hashirama is the best thing that can happen to Konoha. Tobirama concluded coldly, waving away Naruto's ridiculous assumptions like annoying flies. You know better than me that Madara's love is a curse, not a blessing. Give him a chance to fill his emptiness with love for the village, don't take that away from him. She spoke so heartfeltly, raising a wave of anger in him. And it seemed as if Naruto had picked at his soul, deftly pulling out his most secret thoughts. And Tobirama felt uneasy from her insight. It was more comfortable to deny that the Uchiha could love and worry so much. It was easier to portray Madara as evil, just waiting for the moment to show its true self. Tobirama stubbornly denied the existence of Madara's human side. Uchiha. Don't let emotions get involved. Common sense is what you need to use here, the younger Senju said tiredly. It's useless to argue with either Naruto or Hashirama. They're both stubborn and naive. You're the idiot! Insensitive! Naruto emotionally punched him on the blonde crown. You shouldn't always use reason. If it weren't for Madara and Hashirama's sincere experiences, none of this would have happened. No Konoha. No unification. Kagami might already be rotting in the ground. Sarutobi could have been left an orphan or a cripple. Shimura Danzo would have died a terrible death. Everything would have been as before. Children would have died in a war, the reasons for which had sunk into oblivion. There would have been only rivers of blood in the name of revenge. A life for a life, and all that. How can you not understand that the key to peace is love? She chattered hotly and passionately, almost choking on her own feelings burning in her chest. There is a fire burning in your soul, Tobirama said unexpectedly to himself. While Naruto was ranting on about this, he turned on his side, standing up and looking into her spiritual face. She was so stunning at this moment that he frankly admired her, feeling how the anger in him faded away. What? Uzumaki did not understand, turning her slightly clouded gaze to Tobirama, who was already hanging over her. You are so emotional, he said, distantly noting that he was already touching her thigh with his hip. The situation was starting to change radically, acquiring exciting undertones. Is that bad? Naruto frowned, not understanding how to interpret his statement and how to react to the fact that his face was 10 centimeters away from her own. I haven't decided yet, Tobirama admitted, feeling how his priorities were changing dramatically at this moment in his life. How sadness, misunderstanding, and resentment were dissolving under the onslaught of warmth and light emanating from her and her chakra here and now. Her gaze involuntarily slid to his lips. They were so close. Her mouth went dry from the increased excitement, and she swallowed convulsively. Tension settled in her stomach like a hot lump. Tobirama didn't miss it. He felt hot. What was this if not an unambiguous hint? An invitation of sorts. No! This was not a hint at all. He was just imagining things. He was passing off wishful thinking as reality. Senju clenched his jaw, closing his lips, forbidding himself to even think about touching her lips with his again. You could do with being a little more emotional. Naruto touched his cheekbone with her palm, fascinated, and slid it down softly, stroking the outline of his tense jaw. This simple action took his breath away no worse than during a fight. His heart pounded to the rhythm of the battle drums. Tobirama exhaled loudly through his mouth, parting his lips and closing his eyes. His hot breath tickled her wrist in response. Some ridiculous millimeters, and his lips would touch the soft and thin skin. All she had to do was turn her head slightly. What was she doing? How could she not understand that she was provoking him? And you, a little more rational. He resisted the unbearable attraction as best he could. He remembered the morning argument with his brother, which had knocked him down so much. About the reason for the argument, causing him blind rage. About Naruto's meticulous impudence, if only not about her lips. For a brief moment, he believed that he was able to resist. Until he opened his eyes and discovered that there was a critically minimal distance between their lips. Their breath mixed, intoxicating him even more. The world around him began to disappear, narrowing to the two of them. Tobirama sank even lower, touching her nose with his. 10 centimeters shrank to a few millimeters. They froze on a thin line, from which there would definitely be no return if they crossed it. Tobirama still gave her a chance to retreat, as well as himself to change his mind. The situation was heating up. Feelings intensified. Naruto exhaled in surprise, trembling. In order not to get lost in the flow of chaotic feelings, not to drown in this whirlpool, she grabbed his neck, burying her fingers in the hair on the back of his head. Tobirama was going crazy. He gently and carefully rubbed his nose against hers. His lips slid weightlessly over Uzumaki's parted lips, teasing and inviting. He was ready to grab her in his arms and kiss her until she lost her pulse, but he needed confirmation that she shared his feelings and desires. He did not want to suffer later from guilt and shame for not being able to restrain his impulses. Once was enough for him. Naruto was trembling slightly under him. His heavy and hot breath burned not only the skin of her lips, but also the nerve endings. All his senses became impossible. It was becoming more and more difficult to resist temptation. Tobirama again allowed himself, carefully, on the verge of painful tenderness, barely touching, to run his lips over hers. A painful caress. Sweet torture. Naruto felt that she was at a crossroads. And in her current situation, she also understood that the choice was hers. Tobirama had presented this fact in a rather unconventional way. It was a miracle that she was still able to reason logically, because the fire inside was burning everything in its path to the ground. Did she want to give in to the fire that Tobirama had ignited within her? Senju? Of course she wanted to. She wanted to take a deep breath, close her eyes, and running up, without looking, jump into this hellish fire of feelings, not thinking about the consequences. She loved to take risks. But she could not allow herself such irresponsibility towards Tobirama's feelings. Yes, she wanted to. Tobirama was persuading her to give in to what had flared up between them, burning out the air. But between them, in addition to the magnetic attraction, there was a huge lie that would later cause them both great pain. This was the only thing that kept her in check, allowing her to think sensibly. Choose something already. Tobirama croaked into her lips, internally crumbling to pieces from her indecision. He needed specifics. Certainty. He needed it. All of it. Without a trace. And this need was physically painful. You're just drunk. Naruto weakly squeezed out, resisting the pull, finding a reasonably compelling reason for their ambiguous situation. I'm going crazy, he whispered desperately, exposing his weakness to her. He was openly vulnerable now. Real. The way he was somewhere deep in his soul, under a layer of armor. Without his iron self-control and dismissive coldness. Naruto's heart broke from Tobirama's sincere confession. He was still clinging to her. Not pulling away. Balancing on the edge, almost touching her lips with his. Tobirama, it's all the alcohol. Uzumaki stifled the urge to destroy the measly millimeters separating them from the point of no return. Refuse me directly, he demanded defiantly. Push me away. Beat me. Yell at me. Say no. He was tired of the uncertainty and burden of his crush. Tired of living tormented by doubts caused by the ambiguity of her words and actions. I won't let you leave until you make a choice. You won't give me an answer. Senju descended to banal threats. His hot breath, still tickling her lips, contrasted sharply with the ice in his voice. How can I give an answer to something I don't understand myself? She asked, smiling bitterly, looking away. She even wanted to turn away. Or better yet, hide in some dark corner, curl up and feel sorry for herself. Because everything had become so complicated and confusing. She was torn apart by contradictions. What's so unclear? Senju was genuinely perplexed. Everything was crystal clear. From his side. Everything. She was now in despair. You don't understand. In the morning I believed that all this madness and could not be true. Now I am ready to dive into this chaos head-on. But the silence turned out to be dramatically meaningful. Naruto took a convulsive breath, feeling that panic was approaching from the excess of emotions. The pressure that Tobirama was putting on her threatened to crush her morally. And what is stopping you? Tobirama was bothered by his mind. He thought and analyzed too much. It was easy to understand, but harder to accept the facts. After the kiss, everything became completely confusing. But everything could be resolved here and now. While he was drunk and emotional. On the way to his goal, he had one obstacle, Naruto's uncertainty. Only this held him back from crazy actions. As well as the remnants of honor. Still, he pressed her hard, literally drove her into a corner to solve his own problems. Otherwise, it was not very noble on his part. Selfish. I need time to digest this. She was not going to refuse, nor was she going to agree, continuing to marinate Senju in uncertainty. She needed to sort out her own chaos of feelings first, to be honest with him and with herself. And generally understand when she became attached to him. How could this ever happen? And what kind of Bijou does she want to succumb to temptation and kiss him so much? Naruto. He growled her name lowly. Her knees trembled from that. I can't wait any longer. Senju was starting to get angry. First of all, at himself. He should have been smarter, keep his distance, not shorten it. He partly shared her experiences. But only partly. At the moment, he empathized with his own grief more. You had time to think. Good. Since the time to think is limited. Uzumaki flared up, burning with a flash of rage. He really drove her over the edge. You leave me no choice. She growled menacingly now. You should know that my thought process sometimes fails. Some obvious and simple things take me a long time to comprehend, not to mention complex and abstruse ones. I'm terribly slow. Theory is not my thing. But I'm much better at practice. Anger gave birth to desperate determination in her. I don't understand how this is connected. If you regret what happened, remember how selfish you are. She didn't let him get a word in, raising her voice. She had enough of her guilty conscience. He didn't have one, since he was forcing her to give an answer without giving her time to think it over and, by the way, prepare him for the fact that she was also getting a big red demon. I'm warning you. I don't know what I'm doing. You're buried. Naruto mercilessly destroyed the distance that separated them, crushing with her lips all his displeasure about her excessive rudeness. Senju froze in amazement for only a miserable split second. And then he released all his feelings, greedily responding to such a kiss. Chapter 38. Naruto's head was spinning. And she was glad that she was lying on the floor of very suitable support at the moment. Never before had she experienced such a stunning weakness, brought on by waves of pleasure. Tobirama her so ardently and passionately that she was ready to crumble from pleasure into stardust, similar to that which flared up under her eyelids with colored sparks. If before this she had experienced any doubts, now she was completely sure that she had done the right thing. Having experienced this, one could safely die. Only for this could one make the most catastrophic mistake in one's life. Tobirama Senju turned out to be not so cold. On the contrary, quite hot. And Naruto melted with pleasure from the heat that he gave her. And it was difficult to call him insensitive now. A real volcano languished inside his stone heart. It was just that until this moment it was sleeping. Just don't stop, she whispered in a hot delirium, breathing very often, trying to fill her lungs with oxygen as much as possible. PC Tobirama was so greedy that she ran out of oxygen with enviable consistency, and she was simply suffocating in euphoria. No way, Senju promised hoarsely, sliding his lips to her ear to gently but sensually bite the lobe. He didn't stop there, a chain of short PTS, and now he was gently biting the skin at the base of her neck. Naruto, with a surprised sob, arched from the tremor that shot through her spine, pressing her chest into Tobirama, who was hanging over her. And she grabbed his shoulders with her hands so impulsively and desperately, as if she was on the verge of falling, and Senju was the only one who could save her from the abyss that was sucking her in. Senju embraced the deceptively fragile figure, slightly changing his position, pulling her along with him. Burying his nose in the curve of her neck, he breathed heavily. He was shaking violently with barely restrained desire. Uzumaki felt it too vividly. Whatever he did, she enjoyed it so sincerely, selflessly dissolving under the onslaught of his feelings. And it was driving him crazy. Still, if he didn't stop now, then Naruto would continue to shamelessly destroy his control, probably not even knowing what was happening and what a dangerous line they were both walking on. For a moment, he even felt a little ashamed that all his intentions were transparent and clear, and had slid down to primitive instincts. And the call of the body threatened to overcome the voices of reason. "Marry me," he said impulsively, dying from the feeling of her naked skin, brazenly showing from behind her raised t-shirt. His fingers trembled with impatience. He vitally needed to feel her all here and now. He was held back only by the pitiful remnants of discipline and upbringing, gouged out in childhood with rods. What? Naruto, intoxicated by feelings, did not understand. "Marry me," Tobirama repeats clearly and deliberately, more than confident in his intentions. On his part, he has every reason to be so serious. And it seems that he now understands his older brother and his haste in making such an important decision. If she says yes to him, then he will have her the way she wants, where she wants, and for as long as she wants. On a permanent basis. Uzumaki frowns, trying to grasp with her brain, softened by pleasure, the thought that Tobirama is trying to convey to her. The meaning of the proposal reaches her at the same time as irritation from the lack of PC. Naruto is deeply shocked. Just a while ago, he demanded reciprocity from her, and as soon as he gave this reciprocity without a guarantee of a bright future, she was almost immediately asked to marry. Stop! She tensed in his arms. Panic rushed to her, kicking the door open and strangling all the romance at the root. What marriage? Didn't he hear her about her not having figured herself out? And he was the one who constantly called her a fool. They were only CL for the second time. Marriage was a very, very serious thing. She couldn't do it yet. Her tension was immediately transmitted to Tobirama. He instantly became serious and frowned in typical fashion, straightening up and looking at her with such serious anticipation that he felt sick. He had to let her go from his embrace. Wait. You may be the fastest shinobi among all 5 countries, but let's not rush, she began to lament nervously, internally shuddering with horror. Naruto straightened up in the same way, assuming a sitting position. The skin warmed by the warm embrace was instantly repelled by the cool air, causing him to shudder noticeably. The lack of Tobirama's hot embrace is felt incredibly acutely. But a wedding? How scary! The main thing is that he is not the fastest in bed. The fox brazenly took the floor, cutting into the frightened heap of thoughts of his Jinchuriki. Otherwise the older brother is a log, the younger one will soon. Naruto choked on air, coughing from the associations of the Kyuubi. The panic was instantly forgotten. Instead, Uzumaki flared up like a poppy flower, as if she had not been flushed before. Tobirama hurried to get up, intending to give water to Naruto, who was coughing. This allowed him to hide the disappointment that flashed across his face. Although, Molly should be fine with endurance. Most likely, you will be the one begging him to hurry up. The fox sneered, being an extreme sports enthusiast. Making yourself known in the presence of Tobirama is a risky business. The lower abdomen treacherously pulled into a tight, hot knot. Kurama's words launched a chain of memories. Tight and strong muscles creating an amazing relief of a trained body, beads of sweat flowing down alabaster skin, confidence and strength shining through in every movement of Tobirama during sparring with Madara. It was not difficult to imagine a half-naked Senju, just as it was not difficult to try on the image of a lover from Jiraiya's novels, rushing to give her pleasure of a different kind. It was difficult to get it out of her head. Uzumaki choked on air again from the fantasies inspired by Kurama's light paw. But Tobirama clearly did not notice the foreign flash of chakra or was so accustomed to the glimmer of fox energy that they did not alarm him. He worriedly handed Naruto a glass of water, carefully patting her on the back. Naruto accepted the glass with silent gratitude and with trembling hands brought it to her lips, carefully taking a small sip. The cough was still asking to tear her dry throat. The cool water was a blessing, softening the vocal cords irritated by the dry, tearing cough. If only she had another glass. Or better yet, a whole basin of cold water to cool her face, burning with embarrassment. And her insides. The fox turned out to be something else. And she wasn't far behind him. Was it Jiraiya's influence that was having such a detrimental effect on them? We have a lot to hurry about. The cooled and sobered Senju was about to authoritatively crush Naruto with indisputable arguments. The times are such that haste is entirely justified, he said seriously, without removing his hand from her back. His fingers unconsciously entangled themselves in her long, light hair, gently fingering the strands. You are the strongest, Naruto objected, understanding where Senju was heading. Hashirama made an offer to Mito, based on the same conclusions. I am flattered that you consider me the strongest, Tobirama noted with some pleasure. But you yourself understand perfectly well how unpredictable life is. He suppressed a bitter smile, caused by the fact that it sounded like he was pressuring her again to make decisions faster. Almost back to where we started. Tobirama, Naruto looked up at him. I don't mind, but I can't agree right now, she admitted honestly. Her own secrets were beginning to ruin her life, taking away the prospect of a wonderful future. The frustration over this fact was shamelessly pushed aside by a simple caress. Tobirama's fingers wandering along her back and tangling in her hair were seriously distracting her from her thoughts. Goosebumps crawled from the back of her head along her spine again. Isn't it intriguing? If it weren't for her trained nobility, then perhaps you would already know how stamina Molly has. The nine-tailed fox didn't let up, discussing the forbidden topic, thereby driving Naruto crazy. What's stopping you? He was again beginning to be irritated by her. Sort of yes, but still no. If you think about it, that's how it all turned out. Naruto slyly shifted the responsibility for everything that was happening onto his shoulders. Trust, she explained briefly, trying to breathe evenly and not to show how excited she was by the comments of the furry cockroach, who she wanted to throw onto the rug more and more. Love is built on trust. Although, in part, Naruto was grateful to the fox. At least she did not experience unbearable tension at the moment of such a serious conversation. It did not come out as tragic and dramatic as it could have been. You do not trust me? Tobirama was distracted by her scarlet cheeks and lips that were pressed against him. The knowledge that he could freely touch her without being refused was intoxicating. Only the seriousness of the question he had raised kept him on the edge of sane behavior. The problem is not you, but me. You can't trust me. She lowered her gaze, staring at her own knees in confusion. You know that I am full of secrets. I think you even feel it. And the time has not yet come when I can reveal them all. And Tobirama understood with crystal clarity how right she was. Being blinded by his feelings, he somehow forgot that Naruto was a complete mystery. The barrier in Uzumaki's head alone was worth a lot. If you think about it, you can wind yourself up so much that Naruto will instantly become an enemy. Some time ago, Tobirama did this on a regular basis. But you want to reveal them? He decided to clarify whether Tobirama understood her reticence correctly. I really want to. Sincerity was mixed with despair. But I need time. For everything. Okay, Senju hugged her, pulling her to himself, literally dragging the unresisting Naruto onto his lap. Just let's think about your secrets and mysteries in the morning, and he again allowed himself a cowardly weakness, damn it. Slowly and leisurely. And Naruto's world exploded with colored sparks again. Let's do it this way. Naruto took a couple of steps back from him, hugging the remains of the questionnaires to her chest. At the dawn of a new day, everything was returning to its place. Just like their relationship was returning to the stage of not enemies, but not friends either. Only there was no trace left of the former carelessness. Let's wait for the moment when I can be completely frank with you. At the moment, she was the stronghold of sanity and offered the most acceptable scenario for the near future. Tobirama could not think about anything else except her soft lips and hot pussies. The chemistry of the notorious romance specifically melted his brain. Resisting was useless. It was damn hard for him to gather his will into a fist, restoring his cold indifference. Okay, no, not okay. Very not okay. But he had to agree to this. It was important for her. Therefore, it was important for him too. The fact that she was ready to reveal her most intimate secrets to him turned out to be joyless. Naruto, so serious and gloomy, gave her a bad feeling. It will probably be easier for us to live if we don't cross paths with each other for a while. What Uzumaki realized that night was that Night Aim had become an anchor for her in this time. Their meetings, conversations, and squabbles drove away heavy thoughts. And she was drawn to him like a magnet, not because he was an outstanding person. Senju's bad character Tobirama was no less outstanding, as were his merits. He attracted her on an instinctive level as a man. Of course, Naruto loved difficulties, and difficulties loved Naruto. Initially, she was frightened by the fact that the attraction was mutual, and had a basis in romantic motives. It was a frightening surprise. She could not believe that someone like him could feel anything other than disdain for someone like her. And in general, she tried not to think, not to remember, and not to analyze it. Now that all the cards were revealed, the joy of reciprocity threatened to turn into a typhoon and destroy them both. Her secrets would definitely hurt, putting her in front of an agonizing choice. Tobirama Senju loved the nascent Konoha, and Naruto was a potential threat to the village, carrying a nine-tailed demon fox under her heart. The choice would be obvious: many lives against one. There would be no mercy for her. Times are harsh and cruel, and his affection for her could hurt him greatly. And if his feelings are stronger than she imagines, then it could very well destroy her morally. A depressing chain of logic. Yes, it would be better this way, the worst scenario he could imagine. If he had not put pressure on her tonight while drunk, then they would live as before. He would be secretly in love, and she would be ignorant of his feelings for Naruto. It would be much easier to restrain his uncharacteristic impulses than to walk and suffer from the thought that he can touch her, hug her, but in order to repeat it again, he must wait. Waiting threatened to turn into sophisticated torture, to which he voluntarily goes. And he didn't move a muscle when he agreed to her conditions, which he categorically disagreed with. He understood with his mind that Naruto was telling the truth, but his heart desperately did not want to obey the established framework. A real abyss opened up inside, full of disappointment, regret, and melancholy. A fool in love! And where was his vaunted self-control last night? If only he had kept himself in check, everything would have been much simpler. See you later. She smiled tensely and resolutely headed for the exit, unsuccessfully trying to suppress the sadness and despair scratching in her chest. The conditions she had set for herself were harshly oppressive, as were the forced secrets. Tobirama frowned, ordering himself to stand still and not move. He had already allowed himself too much weakness, for which he was now paying. Clenching his fists and gritting his teeth, he looked at her back with bitter melancholy. Naruto hesitated for a moment, frozen in front of the door. She wanted to turn around like hell, hug Tobirama and not let go, and drown in the false hope of a wonderful future. Continuing to keep her in the dark about the fact that there was a demon inside her, and that she was from another time, enjoy his sympathy? Infatuation? Love? Attraction? Whatever it was on his part, she dove into this unknown pool with pleasure. Her moment of weakness was killed by her own disappointing conclusions. Whatever Tobirama felt for her, he would still be hurt by the truth. And Naruto resolutely opened the door, almost knocking Hashirama down with it. Hashirama asked, looking at the gloomy and sullen Tobirama and Naruto. He was in an outrageously good mood. You could say that, Tobirama said coldly and turned away. Hashirama, rehide your stash, Naruto chirped with feigned cheerfulness, not turning her face to the Senju brothers, and waving her hand at them, she walked away, skirting Madara, who was frozen in the corridor. Alcoholism runs in your family, Madara, who entered the office, stated the fact. Uchiha, immediately counting how many empty bottles were in the office. Both Senju ignored this remark. So, the post of the village leader will be called Hokage, Hashirama beamed, proudly puffing out his chest. Which means, Shadow of Fire, he said enthusiastically, getting straight to the point. Madara, closing the door behind him, leaned against it and crossed his arms over his chest, looking askance at the cheerful Hashirama. Gloomy Tobirama sat down at the table, throwing a short but very expressive glance in the direction of his brother. And he hastened to occupy himself by starting to fold the scattered papers into a perfectly even pile. In his opinion, there was nothing to decide. He had already made it clear to Hashirama yesterday what he thought about this. Surprisingly, Madara and Tobirama often did not unanimously share the brilliant ideas of the person who connected them. And I propose that we choose Madara as the first Hokage, Senju said solemnly, shining like 1,000 suns. Madara was genuinely taken aback. Tobirama didn't even look up from the tabletop. Apparently, Senju Jr. had already argued with Senju Sr. about this. Silence fell over the office. Hashirama was still beaming, illuminating everyone with a wide and toothy smile, deliberately ignoring the gathering clouds of tension. I don't hear any objections. The Mokutan user's brown eyes darted between his friend and his brother. His smile widened when, after a long silence, no one said a word against. Hashirama was almost jumping out of his skin with happiness. Wait! Madara expected furious resistance from Tobirama. But it didn't come. The god of thunder sat there, buried in papers, pretending that the two of them weren't there. Such indifference on his part was alarming. What's the catch? Uchiha asked reasonably, shifting his suspicious gaze from Tobirama to Hashirama. There is no catch, Hashirama admitted honestly. It's simple. It's like managing a clan, only a very, very large one. Senju spoke with satisfaction, glad that Tobirama was keeping quiet. The greater the power, the greater the responsibility, the younger Senju said coldly, looking up from his work. This was exactly what his sometimes stupid brother was trying to avoid. And Madara understood. He understood why Hashirama decided to choose him as the head. Yesterday, I stopped his attempt to write your name without your knowledge, Tobirama admitted, leaning back in his chair. Now there will be a spectacle. Perhaps this will distract him sufficiently from his personal problems. Hashirama, Madara said warningly through tightly clenched teeth. What? Hashirama blinks innocently, but tenses up. He senses a storm coming. His radiance fades in the face of the storm front in the face of an angry Madara. And it falls immediately. With Madara's lectures. And then it flows into the fact that the Uchiha and Hashirama are trying to convince each other that their opponent will be the better leader. After listening attentively for about 2 minutes to the lists of merits of both contenders, he began to disconnect from reality, once again plunging into the swamp of his problems. Tobirama had never been so absent-minded before. But now he was exactly like that. In general, he could afford to be inattentive, absorbed in his own experiences, while Madara and Hashirama argued until they were hoarse about who would be better off taking the post of head of the village. Neither of them wanted to take on the leading role, prophesying a mountain of responsibility and a but firmly nailed to a chair. He should revel in their increasingly heated debates proving his case. Madara personally listed his shortcomings, but for the first time he didn't care. Let them vent their frustrations on each other while Senju Jr. analyzed the night before. Savored the memories of their closeness with pleasure. Reflected on the dialogues. Self-flagellation with uncharacteristic zeal. He looked unfocused at Madara and Hashirama flitting around the office, frowning. His head was buzzing slightly from a slight hangover and the raised tones of his bosom friends. But all this didn't stop him from replaying the moment of his and Naruto's separation in his mind over and over again. Tobirama, can you hear me? Hashirama stood on the other side of the table, leaning his palms on the edge of the tabletop, and demandingly asking him something. Sorry, I didn't hear you, the younger Senju returned to reality. Who of us will be the better leader? Hashirama asked seriously. Apparently, they have not come to the right decision. Of course you, Madara snorts contemptuously, knowing about Tobirama's bias towards the Uchiha. The answer is obvious. I propose a popular vote, Madara insists. Tobirama slightly raises an eyebrow in surprise. He considered the Uchiha greedy for power. After all, Madara's favorite pastime is to revel in his strength and influence. Look, he keeps the entire clan in fear. Hashirama furiously shook his head, silently objecting to this proposal. I scare people. They are afraid of me, the head of the red-eyed clan reasoned sensibly. Nonsense, Hashirama was indignant. Not nonsense. They are afraid of him, the Uchiha agreed with the argument. Tobirama. The Uchiha's lips twisted into a victorious grin. Hashirama is the most logical option, he has a good personality. Tobirama stood up. The walls of the office were stifling, and the squabble between Hashirama and Madara was giving him a migraine. His opinion would not be taken into account anyway. Hashirama stubbornly did not want to be a leader, and Madara, it turned out, did not either. As expected, they had no other contenders. And Konoha was still their brainchild. Some kind of vicious circle. The three of us will decide, Senju said stubbornly, trying to escape the prospect of enormous responsibility to the last. There is nothing to decide here. There are three of us. You choose me, I choose you. Tobirama chooses you. That is the whole solution. Madara described the logical chain. The matter is closed. And the Uchiha turned sharply, intending to leave. Tobirama thoughtfully looked at the back of the departing Madara. The prospect of greater power frightened Uchiha. He was ready to do everything possible for the safety of the village, which he had proven to them earlier, but not as a leader, but as an executioner standing behind the head. He was ready to dip his hands in blood, hiding in the shadows. And this could contribute to the complete immersion into darkness of the already dark soul of the head of the Red-Eyed clan. It seemed Naruto was right. It was worth letting Madara fill his empty heart with love for the village and its inhabitants. And Hashirama, if he felt danger in Madara, would not have taken such a step. Maybe it's time to trust my brother's big and kind heart. What did Naruto say? Will love save the world? If anything happens, Tobirama and Hashirama will save the village from Madara's excessive love. Madara, Tobirama says reluctantly. Hashirama is too soft for a leader. The Uchiha freezes. Hashirama's eyes flash with hope. What? Turns around, displeased and angry Uchiha, ready to give a verbal rebuff to any remark Tobirama makes. It's not such a bad idea if Madara becomes the leader of the village. Tobirama is clearly going crazy, saying this out loud. But he is ready to give him a chance. Hashirama blinks in disbelief, mouth agape. Madara freezes, the mask of a hardened antagonist cracking at the seams, revealing genuine shock. Congratulations on your appointment. Tobirama congratulated the dumbfounded Madara on his new title with routine politeness, and walked out of the office. Let them decide for themselves what and how, after all, it was their idea, let them take the rap themselves. And he was taking the day off today. Chapter 39. Naruto stepped tiredly over the threshold of the apartment. Most of the shinobi she wanted to strangle Konoha. But the mission she had taken upon herself had been accomplished. She had surveyed everyone over the age of 12. Yawning widely, she tiredly threw off her shoes, leaning against the door. The only thought that was beating in her head was to go to bed. But looking at the streaks of dust that had settled on her toes, she realized that sleep was delayed for about 10 minutes. The dim strip of light from the window was enough to understand that water procedures should not be postponed. No matter how broken she felt, she desperately needed rest. So much had happened that before she could painlessly digest it, she needed to rest properly. Gouge out his eyes, citing self-defense. Kurama twitched his whiskers, grinning angrily. Who him? Naruto did not understand. What are you talking about? She asked the demon out loud. To the one you're going to explain it to now, to the one you're talking to out loud. Kyubi explained patiently, no longer surprised that his Jinchuriki simply didn't feel threatened. This time was having a bad effect on her. Madara already she doesn't perceive the Uchiha lurking in her apartment as a threat. However, he's not going to reveal the identity of the uninvited guest to her. And that's what he hinted at. Uzumaki immediately froze tensely, sliding her hand to her hip bag. The blood in her veins froze. Excitement and anxiety pulled her stomach in a slippery and cold lump. Naruto, not showing that she felt anything, and making as much noise as usual, entered the only room. She acted preemptively. Kurama instructed her in which part of the room the enemy was hiding, skillfully suppressing his chakra, completely hiding his presence. In the eyes. Aim for the eyes! The fox egged her on. Throwing her right hand to the side, simultaneously turning her whole body with the movement of her hand, she thrust the weapon into the wall, and the clenched fist of her left hand painfully crashed into the wooden partition, knocking off her knuckles. A large shadow darted to the side, dodging the blow. Naruto rushed after it, leaving the kunai sticking out of the wall, taking out the next dangerous piece of iron on the go, and swinging for the next blow. The dark and shaggy silhouette, fortunately, froze in place, making her task easier. In the gathering twilight, she did not immediately understand who was waiting for her in the apartment. The shagginess of the shadow led to certain thoughts the malicious violator of her peace turned out to be Madara. Naruto wanted to slow down to stop the blow, but inertia carried her forward against her will. The Uchiha blocked the blow without blinking an eye. Kunai are not toys for children. The blade of the scythe, colliding with the sharpened tip of the kunai, struck a sheaf of sparks, creating a nasty screeching sound. Naruto snorted angrily. So this is who Kurama asked to gouge out the eyes. It was necessary to immediately guess that if the fox spoke about eyes, then by this he meant Uchiha. And doors are for weaklings, right? Hissed the angry Uzumaki. She brought a hard one. And if I killed you? Her eyes blazed with indignation and anger. Madara snorted contemptuously at her remark, rewarding her for her ridiculous fantasies with an arrogant look. Okay, Naruto put away her weapon, returning the kunai to her hip bag. Most of the tension disappeared. Only a slight itching excitement remained. No one was going to kill her. But Madara's presence could be marked as a bad sign. Uzumaki turned around and went to turn on the light. And happiness was so close. Kurama exhaled in disappointment, disappearing from the periphery of her consciousness. I didn't notice you talking to yourself. Madara put away his weapon, the scarlet gleam dissolved in his eyes, revealing to the world the dark depths of black amethyst. Loneliness, damn it, she nervously shrugged her shoulders, as if she wanted to brush off such questions that were creeping into her soul. Right under the seal. Madara chuckled again. Which could be deciphered as, I had no doubt that you were crazy. Naruto relaxed inwardly. It would be better to let them think she was crazy. For now. And then she would show them all. No one in their right mind would stick their nose into her apartment without an invitation. Doors, do you know what doors are? Or are you so conservative that you deny the existence of this phenomenon of progress? Naruto muttered angrily, furiously poking at the switch. The light came on, making the space of her apartment brighter and lighter. Look, there's nothing complicated about it. Naruto stepped towards the door. And slowly, very slowly, as if she was explaining to a child how to use chopsticks, she placed her palm on the handle, pressing it with the same slow and exaggerated demonstrative pressure. One movement, and it gives in. But before opening the door to someone else's house, you need to knock, and removing her palm from the handle, she clenched it into a fist and knocked on the wooden surface. She knocked loudly. See, nothing complicated. Madara looked at this performance indifferently, not expressing any emotions. I'm crucifying myself in vain, Naruto sighed disappointedly and waving her hand at Madara, as if he were a hopeless case, returned to the room. Tell me what you came for, and get lost, and wearily plopped down on the stool, putting her palm under her chin. Her heavy head was pulled towards the pillow, and then Madara appeared. Is it your doing? Madara walked to the table, standing opposite Naruto. Uzumaki watched him carefully, and at his question she raised an eyebrow in surprise. Misunderstanding was reflected in her eyes, and instantly replaced by indignation. What am I guilty of? Today she was guilty of only one thing she almost had to break Tobirama's heart. Senju. Until now, she couldn't believe that he had one. And that this very heart had such tender and trembling feelings for her. Did I cross your path somewhere? She sneered. In her opinion, this could be her only sin against Madara. Maybe she really didn't notice and ran past, stepping on his feet or pushing him. So he came to take revenge on her. How did you influence Tobirama so that he agreed? Madara, apparently, decided to confuse her to the extreme. Her eyebrows crept even higher. I don't understand the point of your claims. Uzumaki was irritated. Her head was already boiling from thoughts on the topic of, what did she do to displease Madara today? Why Tobirama? Senju wasn't against my taking over as Hokage? Madara said crisply. Her eyebrows were ready to leave her forehead, so great was her surprise. She stared blankly at Madara, straightening up. To be sure, she also grabbed the edge of the tabletop. You never know, even a stool wouldn't save her from falling. Her shock was enormous. Hokage is the leader of the village. That's what Hashirama called this post, Madara explained, not really paying attention to the shock that gripped Naruto. Yes, I know, she blurted out, leaning forward. Tobirama seriously agrees to see you as the first? She was still rocking on the waves of shock. Well, when she was telling Tobirama at night that Madara wasn't so bad, she didn't even hope for such an outcome. This news knocked the ground out from under her feet. That's the thing, I agree, Madara still couldn't come to terms with this thought. And no matter how much he thought about it, he couldn't come to any logical justification for such an unexpected choice. More precisely, the only thing that seemed adequate was that Senju Jr. had gone crazy. And Naruto, who was leaving Senju's office early in the morning, had affected his mind. Madara, of course, assumed that Tobirama had decided to outplay and destroy him in this way. It would be easier to catch him doing something that would prove to everyone around him that Madara was terrible, no matter how you looked at it. But Senju Jr. wouldn't take such a risk. It turned out, after all, that his best friend's younger brother had gone crazy. Wow! She breathed out in amazement, looking at Madara with wide eyes. Congratulations on your appointment! Naruto beamed. She didn't see a problem here. For now. Did you give him these thoughts? Uchiha ignored her congratulations. His eyes lit up red from the thought that he was now the leader of this whole bacchanalia. Hashirama, of course, wanted to dump this mountain of responsibility from his shoulders and continue living happily ever after. But where was Tobirama looking? Madara seemed to have guessed where. With the appearance of this woman, their lives changed dramatically. Naruto became the trigger for many important events. It was she who blurted out about Konoha to Hashirama. It was she who brought Mito to the village, and his friend lost his head from love. She somehow got close to the unapproachable Tobirama, dictating to him what to do. She did not perceive him, the great and mighty Madara, as a threat, and allowed herself too much. Then in the temple he felt Tobirama. He knew that he was coming for his soul, ready to accuse him of all sins and declare him an evil of universal proportions. If Tobirama got to him, Hashirama would have no brother left. Madara would have let off steam by killing the underdog Senju. At that moment, his rage was so strong that he would have broken loose, avenging Izuna. His world collapsed again, there was nothing to lose. But here she was, compassionate Naruto, who worried about someone like him. Who protected him from complete madness, from killing his best friend's younger brother. From completely plunging into the abyss of darkness. And she was also absurdly sensitive. She knew what was on his mind. She understood that he needed Hashirama's support. That Madara was on the edge. She didn't push herself, didn't impose herself, but she knew so much about him that it became uneasy. She started talking about the Biju then. Yes, she knew a lot about all of them. He heard her fiery speech when the idiot Senju argued. A short and precise summary of their essence. It turns out that only she was smart enough to brainwash Tobirama with her cunning speeches. Why did you decide that I have so much power over him? Naruto crossed her arms over her chest, fencing herself off from Madara's sudden insight. For her, it was a revelation that night that she had an influence on Tobirama. Your stupidity is contagious, he says sharply, feeling a hint of irritation. Wait. Naruto ignored his rudeness. Are you afraid of responsibility? Uzumaki was amazed by the sudden guess. And she thought that he was much more serious and responsible. Hashirama. An uninvited laugh tickled her chest from the inside. Just a little more, and she would laugh. The great and mighty Uchiha Madara, who single-handedly subdued the nine-tailed demon fox, is afraid to rule one small village. Very funny. You'll die laughing. The claims turned out to be well-veiled fear. Only this kept Naruto from laughing out loud. Madara gritted his teeth and slashed her with such an angry look that she should have choked on her own blood in an instant. Logically, the insult was fatal. Especially for the inflated and exorbitant ego of the Uchiha. Then what kind of bijou are you pestering me with claims? Naruto frowned, digging her fingers into her knees. Because she wanted to scratch them on the arrogant Uchiha's face in the old-fashioned way. You must understand that I'm terrible. Convince Tobirama to take back his words and vote for his brother, yes. She's right. Damn right. He will destroy his and Hashirama's dream with his own hands. His methods are questionable, radical, and based on fear control. This is not the set of qualities needed to rule a village. Someone besides him must be a stronghold of common sense. Naruto was like that sometimes. So, Naruto was starting to go crazy. Madara was added to the piggy bank of tricky oddities, asking her to influence Tobirama. Here we go. My head was buzzing. He came with complaints, and rolled down to requests. It smelled of despair. You will not be left alone. Everything will not be only on your shoulders, Naruto said tiredly. Apparently, Madara also overheard that yesterday's argument between the Senju brothers. And maybe their night dialogue with Tobirama. Then what is the point of me becoming the leader alone, if others will have power too? The Uchiha asked a sly question. You should not come to me with this, Naruto waved him off. You need a new goal. A new meaning in life. Take it and act, she said seriously, looking at him intently. Madara hadn't looked at this post from that angle. Again, this Uzumaki was getting to the root of the matter. And with her piercing blue eyes she was turning his soul inside out. And this thought inspired him. The only thing was that the fear of screwing up hadn't gone away. The Uchiha was chilled by her insight. Damn it. Okay, Madara gave up. This fight was lost. He wanted to be the leader of Konoha, if he was honest with himself. So why try to convince everyone else otherwise? Hashirama would be with him, capable of bringing him to his senses, and the brilliant Tobirama, who would be like a watchdog, sitting on guard of the village and barking when Madara decided to do something questionable. And Naruto, who would just be there, for fun, sharing his burden with him. As the future leader of the village, I appoint you as my assistant and right hand, thin lips stretched into a caustic grin. What? Naruto choked on air, instantly remembering Shizen, who stood behind the fifth almost 24/7, being on errands. No! No! She doesn't want it like that. Madara left the indignantly surprised Naruto without an answer, dissolving in a cloud of Shunshin. Who immediately, without thinking to put on her shoes, rushed to intercept Madara, jumping out of the wide open window. What was that? Naruto flew into the main house of the Uchiha clan head's estate complex. You also need a meaning in life, use it. Madara was already having dinner, having changed into a home yukata. His face was a stone mask again. I don't give a damn about such a meaning in life. Uzumaki blazed, disagreeing with what was happening. Why did you decide that I need it? She burned holes in the imperturbable Madara, calmly eating pickled vegetables and rice. Her stomach rumbled from the smells of home-cooked food. Since you decided that I need a meaning in life, Uchiha said without looking up from his meal. His heart sensed that Naruto had made some effort to butter up Senju. And Madara doesn't want to see Tobirama as an advisor. And Naruto is cooking a pot. Sometimes you wouldn't even say that she was a savage who had come out of the woods. He had received many complaints about her meticulousness today. And they shoved the forms she was running around with under his nose. The clansmen considered themselves above filling out these papers. Madara looked at them with interest, and noted for himself that Naruto had asked the questions correctly. The clansmen, with sour faces, filled out the sheets under Madara's supervision. He remembered how Hashirama had retold that Naruto had led Tobirama to the final result of the mission ranking. So, he shouldn't have made a mistake with his choice. Uzumaki would be better Naruto as an assistant than the disgusting face of some albinos. Hashirama made it clear that he was completely absorbed in the affairs of the hospital. But you need it. Naruto threw up her hands and slapped her bare feet, covered in dirt and dust, to the table. Madara glanced sideways at this lawlessness, pursing his lips in disgust. You too. You yourself recently walked as if you had lost your purpose in life. You were a walking corpse. Didn't eat, didn't drink. And howled at the moon, Madara listed. Unfortunately, he was neither blind nor deaf. He had to endure this for several days. Light sleep and shinobi instincts played a cruel joke. All of Naruto's moans were in the palm of his hand. Naruto, with each of his words, acquired an increasingly redder shade of face until it became the color of an overripe tomato. There was nothing to object to here. She had been hysterical for several days. Madara, unlike her, dealt with it in one outburst of anger. Uzumaki unceremoniously sat down opposite him, took the cup from him, and poured herself some wine. But she didn't touch it. My world collapsed. It was my fault. On the one hand, it untied my hands, and now I can live the way I want. But I'm bitter because I lost my past. I crossed it out with one movement of my hand. Consider that I lost a part of myself. A large part of myself. The one that made me who I am. It still hurts, but I try not to think about it. Otherwise, it will destroy me. Naruto looked at the wine, as if she was talking to it. Her nose stung treacherously. A cloudy veil clouded her vision. The words flowed out of her with ease, exposing her soul. Madara, resting his elbow on his bent knee, relaxedly watched Naruto confess. And understood her. Like no one else. I agree. Naruto drained the cup in one gulp, without wincing. The wine Madara drank was pleasant to the taste and sweet. And slightly sweetened the bitter pill of the rising despair. Madara. Naruto looked up at him. Frighteningly determined. I am addressing you as the one everyone fears because of the power of the cursed eyes. What awaits me if my power turns out to be not a blessing, but a curse for Konoha? At that moment, she stopped breathing, waiting for an answer. Now her future fate would be decided. Madara would be Hokage, which meant she could enlist his support. This was a chance for a normal life in this era. Are you going to use this power against Konoha? Madara asked. Interest lit up his dark eyes. He was close to uncovering her secret. And he felt a paranormal unanimity. The same as with Hashirama. As if on the same wavelength. No way. Naruto admitted honestly. I'm ready to die for the village. And it wasn't pompous bravado, but a sincere statement. So Hashirama and Madara desperately and passionately desired a world where children sent to war wouldn't die. Where there was no war at all. She burned with it. Lived with it. And probably it was precisely this that didn't break her in a moment of grief. As well as him. Konoha is an anchor. If you take it away, it will fall into the abyss. No good-natured Hashirama will save it. He couldn't change the world, but he could try to make Konoha better. Then there's no reason to eliminate you. Even if you're damned 3 times. And you'll be under my careful control, assistant. Madara relaxed. And without ceremony, he took a small jug and sipped from the bottle. The highest degree of trust is to remove the mask of a vain aristocrat. Who else will be under whose control? A failed evil of a global scale. Uzumaki was indignant, shrugging her shoulders. All her worries disappeared as if by magic. Her soul became lighter. Madara, under her sensitive control, this thought should help her come to terms with the fact that she was forced to become the right hand of the future first. Madara raised an eyebrow a miserable millimeter in amazement. Naruto really felt him. As if she knew that he was on the verge of just such a global evil. Forced. Bringing goodness with difficulty. As it turned out, the illusion of a world without pain. And now she allowed herself to casually joke about this. Why me? She asked, becoming impudent and taking food from the plates with her fingers. Madara promised himself that he would first of all take care of her discipline, so that she would not disgrace the head of the village. Because I will enjoy watching Tobirama suffer, the Uchiha grinned darkly, fixing his gaze on her. He had just voiced, probably, the most important reason why he had chosen her. Naruto choked. A piece of half-chewed daikon got into her throat, standing across there. Choking, she tried to clear her throat. Madara watched her suffering with pleasure. Naruto looked at him with hatred, through a veil of uninvited tears. Apparently, she understood it the way she understood it. As it was implied. Was it really noticeable? Clearing her throat, she could only raise an eyebrow questioningly. So it is true, the Uchiha grinned smugly, having drawn the necessary conclusions. Uchiha, I will make your life miserable, Naruto croaked quietly, as soon as she defeated the piece of food stuck in her throat. Make his life miserable, and I will triple your salary, Madara continued to amuse himself. I promise to sponsor your dowry. The best. Exquisite, he said with gloomy composure, while Naruto blushed and then turned pale. Only her incinerating gaze was unchanged. You have a very poor sense of humor. Naruto did not touch the food anymore. Who knows, he still has something in store that will make her choke from surprise. And I'm not joking. I'm serious, and his serious look proved it in the best possible way. You won't even have to ask me, I'll take over the organization, Madara promised. Oh gods! Naruto howled, rolling her eyes to the ceiling. And what kind of bijou did she use to defend the Uchiha's rights to the post of Hokage in front of Tobirama? Madara saluted her with a jug of wine and took another sip. His mood had improved, he no longer extinguished the sparks of joy that flared up in the depths of his eyes. But Naruto's, on the contrary, had worsened. She had allowed a real monster to come to power.